Time now for our weekly partnership segment with The Lever. And joining us now is the man himself, David Sirota of that outlet. Great to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So this week, you guys are taking a look at a potential path to end dark money. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is from Andrew Perez. It says how Democrats could actually end dark money. Senate Democrats will vote Thursday on a dark money disclosure bill known as the Disclose Act. They should do what's needed to let it succeed. So first of all, just break down for us, David, what is actually in this bill?
So the key part of this bill is to force 501c4 organizations to disclose their major donors. 501c4 organizations are technically, quote unquote, social welfare organizations. What they actually are, many of them in practice, are dark money groups. They're the groups that spend money in elections, anonymous money, slamming candidates, supporting candidates. Some of them say, go tell this candidate this, go tell this candidate not to do this. But the point is that they are conduits for anonymous money to essentially influence and really buy elections. And by the way, not just elections, but pushing for legislation, pushing for court appointments and the like. We don't know who is actually funding all of these groups, even though I think it was in 2020, $1 billion of dark money was spent in the 2020 election. So point is, a huge amount of unknown anonymous cash flooding into our elections to buy essentially our democracy. That is one of the threats of to our democracy. And the bill would simply say, the big provision of it would simply say, these organizations have to tell us who their donors are, and the interesting thing is that 50 Democrats in the Senate are officially sponsoring this legislation. No Republicans are sponsoring it, and it's just a disclosure bill.
Yeah, have you heard any good faith arguments against it, or they just don't really want to talk about it at all?
Well, the Republicans have been saying, listen, we don't usually agree with organizations like the ACLU, but on this one we do. And the ACLU, as an example, has put forward an argument that 501c4 organizations should have the right to some level of privacy, that donors should have the right to some level of privacy. And so the Republicans, if you think they're making a good faith argument, I guess if you take them at their word, they are saying that, I guess, donors should have a right to privacy. I mean, my argument would be that if you're trying to influence public policy, public elections, the public space, and you're doing it at a level of, millions, if not billions of dollars, the public should have a right to know at least who effectively is talking to the public in that public square.
So here's a potentially more difficult question answer, or maybe it's not, I don't know. Yes, you have 50 Democratic sponsors on this bill. Are they actually committed to the underlying principle? Because you guys covered that the DNC just had an opportunity to ban dark money just from within their own primaries. So you're not having this whole we don't want to unilaterally disarm against the Republicans. You're just talking about Democratic primaries. They didn't even take it up. So if this had an actual chance of really passing and it wasn't just like a virtue signaling effort, do you think you would still have this level of Democratic support?
That's really hard to know. It's a great question. I think one thing we can take away from this is if Joe Biden is giving a speech at the White House calling on the Senate to pass this, if 50 Senate Democrats are officially sponsoring the bill, including Manchin and Sinema and the like, what it tells you at least is that the party recognizes that the politics around the issue of corruption is now salient. That's a good thing. What I'm trying to say is that I think if Joe Biden has a dark Brandon power at all, his dark Brandon power is to figure out where the center of the Democratic Party is and try to put himself there. And the center of the Democratic Party has clearly now feels the need to acknowledge and portray itself as against kind of unregulated money of corrupting our democratic process. And that took years to kind of move the center there. That's the good news. The bad news is what you're talking about, which is they're bringing up this bill knowing that they're not going to kill the filibuster to allow the bill to actually pass. By the way, in the past, when the Democrats had a trifecta in 2010, they did the same thing. They essentially allowed the filibuster to not let this bill, the same kind of bill, pass. So it does raise the question: how much of this is theater? How much of the Democratic support would be there for the Disclose Act if they actually were serious about doing everything that's necessary to pass it? I don't know what those numbers are, but
Yeah.
I think it's a fair question.
Well, and it's become even more salient of a question in certain ways because we've seen the way that dark money has been incredibly instrumental in establishment Democrats keeping their establishment allies. So
Oh,
money,
yeah.
massive amounts of money. Well, I'll let you lay it out because you probably know the numbers better than I have, but there's really been a war on the progressive left of the party, and dark money has been an instrumental tool for the powers that be to keep their grip.
Oh, for sure. I mean, millions and millions of dollars were spent just in the last few months through dark money groups in those primaries to essentially crush insurgent progressive candidates in their nominating contests. So, yes, the Democratic Party has used dark money to essentially put the thumb on the scale and select nominees in local races that it wants. Point being, there's a big, powerful part of the Democratic power elite that likes dark money, that actually relies on dark money. Also worth saying that in the last election, 2020, the Democrats benefited more from dark money, at least the dark money sources that we know of, than the Republicans did. That there was $1 billion of dark money spending, and most of that was there to help Democrats. Now, it's not to say the Republicans weren't helped by their own dark money, but the point is that you're absolutely right. And this goes back to what you raised before, that the Democratic Party just recently blocked even having a vote on a resolution from some of its own DNC members to simply say, let's not have dark money in our own primaries. So I think this is really important. But I come back to the idea that there really is good news here. The bottom line is, if the president of the United States feels the need to come out to the public and say, look at me, look how much I am against dark money, and I'm demanding the Democratic Senate actually pass this, some of it can be seen as theater, but it is an acknowledgement that this issue of corruption is, and polls show this, is becoming a huge issue among voters. And the only way, ultimately, I think we're going to get something like the Disclose Act is if there's enough voters, enough of a critical mass, making it clear to politicians that this is a kind of line in the sand issue and people want action.
Yeah, I think that's all well said. And while transparency isn't obviously all the reforms we would want in terms of campaign finance, it does give voters a greater understanding of the forces that are shaping, the vote taking and the way these candidates are running campaigns. And that level of transparency enables reporters such as yourselves to really help expose the game of what's actually going on here. So,
and can I make one last point on this? Because there's one small point here also, which is to say that also transparency, I think, can provide some level of deterrent to some of the worst dark money behavior. What I'm saying is that part of the reason we've seen such an explosion in dark money is because the biggest of big donors know they can flood the system with money without having to take the kind of public heat, without having to face the kind of public scrutiny that they would if there were transparency laws on the books. So transparency in a way is a way to say, listen, if you want to dump money into elections and try to buy the political process, you're going to have to actually be known to the world that you're doing that. And that can be something of a deterrent to some of the most egregious behavior here.
I think that is a wonderful point. The Stock Act that discloses, the trades that are being made by members has been an incredibly powerful tool, both for investigative journalists and also for grassroots efforts to try to hold these politicians to account and hopefully eventually maybe force a change in terms of what members of Congress are allowed to do. David, always great to have you. Everybody go and subscribe to The Lever if you are able. They are doing work that no one else is doing, really pushing a people's agenda to get to the root of all of this money in politics and corruption that is such an important force shaping our politics. Great to see you, David.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you all for watching. More for you later. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.